My name is Elizabeth Castle. I'm one of the nurse practitioners here in the Center for Advanced Intestinal Rehabilitation at Boston Children's Hospital. And I'm really excited to welcome everyone today to our video webinar. I am joined with our registered nurse, Carol Cheney, today, and as well, the Calhoun family. We're really excited to welcome them as well as we talk today a little bit about the process of transitioning from hospital to home and how our program really works to support our families. We're really excited that the Calhouns are here today to share their experience, as not too long ago they went through this process. Primarily, in the short bowel population, a lot of our families spend a pretty long amount of time in the hospital at first, especially after sort of the initial period of time and some surgeries. So there's a lot of care that goes into our patients and our families while they're in the hospital. And then we ask them to take their kiddos home and do a lot of this in the outpatient setting. And that is a really big undertaking and can be daunting and stressful. And so we work really hard to facilitate our families doing this process and support them all the way through. Carol works really closely with some of our families as they sort of go through this process as well. And I know they often express some of their concerns and questions, and I'm hoping Carol can share some of that with us today.
Yes, and it is so nice to be here today and to look at the Calhouns. You're just a shining example of how great things can be. So it's perfect. I do know that in meeting many of our families, as a connection between the care department and our inpatient team, many times there's relationships that are built with our inpatient team, which is great, but there's sometimes a disconnect when you go home, like, okay, well, I've known this team for the last 2, 4, 6 months. And who's taking care of me when I leave? So I would really appreciate like your input. And how did it feel to you, Rich and Katie, like when you were in the hospital with Bowden? What was it like for you, knowing that you were going to be going and leaving kind of the security of people who were caring for your son, and then having you do that?
I think security is such a great word to explain that feeling in the hospital. I knew that he was being cared for 24 hours a day. And I was very nervous about that date when we were going to depart. And yet at the same time excited. We have 3 older children who are still young enough to really need us at home. And so we are excited to go. And that question constantly was, am I really ready, or am I just wanting to get home? And even when I left, wondering like, do they think I'm really ready, or is it just that I need to be with my others as well? But we were ready, and we had some challenges thrown at us initially, and I just remember them. Or us, we were always being told that it was going to be a couple stressful weeks, and then it would really start to feel second nature. And I think that's exactly how it went for us.
Yeah, I think in the hospital, we got into a routine that felt comfortable, even though we live 3 hours from Boston. And so it was stressful and it was exhausting in all those ways, because we were tag teaming back and forth in and out to hang out with our other kids. But at the same time, it felt like a comfortable routine, and we knew that Bowden was safe. And so I think those conversations were intimidating, but the reassurance that in a few months you're going to know how to do this with Bowden better than we can here at the hospital. I didn't believe the nurses who kept telling me, like in my training and everything, like when I kept making mistakes, and they kept on saying, no, like you're going to know how to do this. And I didn't believe them, and turns out they were right the whole time. And I'm still learning, but it definitely helped with the transition.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think those feelings of getting home and thinking, was I really ready? I'm home now. What do we do next? Kind of a feeling was a big genesis for where we decided to create a resource to help support families. Similar to what Carol talked about, we saw this gap between the inpatient team, and then establishing the relationships with us who primarily follow patients in the outpatient setting and are going to follow these patients for a really long time to come. And so we developed a discharge resource book to provide sort of clarity on the team and who's going to take care of your child when you guys go home, and you guys when you're home. So we developed this resource book and put it into practice to try to bridge this gap between the inpatient and the outpatient team. Carol has become incredibly instrumental in us getting that into place and spends a lot of time with families at the bedside in-house before they go to make sure that they feel really well oriented to it. Carol, if you wanted to take some time to talk about that.
Sure. So in coming to the CAIR team, I feel like I've been in this hospital forever. And I have, but I was actually in a different role. So I was on the other side. I was actually the nurse who used to come in and teach patients to go home. So I spent a lot of time at the bedside in the hospital, but then I actually went home with patients. So I knew what was the ideal, and I also knew what was real when people go home and what the expectations could be. So working with Elizabeth, for us, we really felt that it was a moment that we could really bridge that gap. And Elizabeth actually developed the resource binder, and where we're taking it and where our goal is always is for families to have a very clear expectation of who's who in our team and what do we do. And by going to the floor and actually, we're a multidisciplinary team, as you guys knew, because our inpatient presence is still there. Even while you're inpatient, we're still rounding on patients and having our multidisciplinary team come in and see you during different parts of the process for you going home. So, we're our home PN team, which is an incredible team that works with the CAIR team to get people ready for the actual hands-on for PN prep, and working closely with the company that's going to be taking care of you when you go home, so that there's always open communication. But we always felt that it was really important that you had a point person prior to going home, so that you knew, what's it going to be like when I go home? Who am I going to call? And where are those phone numbers? So this discharge binder really kind of hit home with that. And I know that there's a lot of documentation, and you guys are given a lot of things prior to going home. But my hope, and what our hope and goal has always been, is that you feel the connection, so that that, as you said, Rich, the first couple of weeks are going to be crazy. You're going to feel really overwhelmed, and you're going to feel like, I have no idea what I'm doing. But I know who my people are. And I also know that this group, they are my people, and they are going to be there, and they're going to support me. And when I come back from my very first visit, and I'm no longer on the inpatient side, but living in the outside world, I know how it's going to run. So one of the things that we talk about in the discharge binder is like what to expect for the first visit. Like, how do you even get there? What's the name of the building? Do I need snacks? Do I need to bring treats or toys for Bowden? Because, the process itself is, because we are such a complex multidisciplinary team, there are a lot of people who touch and who see you during that time frame. And I think it's actually one of the coolest things about this team is that there are so many different people who are so invested in you and your son. So for that reason, I think especially it was important that you kind of had a really clear expectation of how this is going to run. So tell me, what was your first couple of days like when you went home?
So I'll address. So when we were leaving the hospital in June, it was our older 3 children had a chance to see my mom for the first time in a few years. Because of COVID and those things. And so I was actually away when Bowden and Katie came home for the first night. So that added an additional level of complexity. And so I'm not going to claim that the first 48 hours was my story, because I was on the other end of a phone listening and empathizing. But I think Katie, yeah. Sorry.
So I'm so grateful for that white book, but also that in the hospital before I left, I went through it with a nurse, and they had me put on my phone the phone numbers that were highlighted in that book, and then in my phone it also says next to it when to call this number. And that was so helpful that first night, it turns out, because we were delayed in leaving the hospital. Usually the plan was to put him on his TPN at 7, and we got home at midnight, and we had a visiting nurse waiting, bless her, in our very rural driveway, to help me put him on that first night. But the pump wasn't working right, it turns out. But I knew who to call, and actually the nurse, it was a new thing for her, and so we were learning together through the page number. But it was perfect. I called the page number, I was called back, and I was a mess probably, but the person on the other end of the line was not, and could talk me through exactly what we needed to do and reassure me that Bowden was going to be okay, and he was okay. And I think he was asleep before we finished what we had to do with him. So definitely was happy and relaxed and asleep. But that whole system that I was assured was going to be there for me was there, and I didn't think I was going to have to use it quite so quickly. But within a couple hours of getting home, I was aware that I had my people back in Boston to help us through those sort of situations. And we were talking about how we've had several back and forth, but each time I feel like I'm more equipped to handle the next time something comes up. So we're learning through it, but and I never ever felt that a phone call was, did they really need to hear from me for this? I've always felt that my question, whether it truly needed a immediate phone call or not, was always welcomed, I guess.
And beyond that first night, I mean, the nights where things don't go perfectly according to plan, and there are definitely nights where that happens, and the PN doesn't flow in the right direction, and it's scary, and we don't know what to do. Everyone on the phone is there on the phone with us until we resolve the issue, and just the number of people who have helped us through a couple of evenings, and it seemed seamless, even though we know it on the other end in Boston. It's a chain of people. They've walked us through things. It's been incredible when we've needed that support.
Yeah,
that's great.
That's awesome. And do you guys have any, advice now that you're this much further out for families who might be looking towards discharge or going home?
I think going into that first transition home, knowing that, and we were told, quite frankly, it's going to feel stressful, and I think my brain was somewhat still mush from not getting full nights of sleep and trying to balance a lot. It was stressful, but it started to feel routine a lot more quickly than I ever believed it was going to. And what seemed like way too many things to keep track of, now I almost feel like a robot could do this, no problem. There's nothing to it. Why was this ever so stressful? And that change to becoming to a place where I felt really comfortable happened a lot more quickly than I thought. I'll jump back in too about the school nurse. So.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. I think the muscle for me, the biggest hurdle for me, kind of mentally, being discharged, was trusting my kind of hand-eye coordination with his lines, and trusting that I could do the process and not contaminate anything or make mistakes. And everyone reassured me that, you're going to go through these tests, you're going to go home, it's going to be second nature. I'm not sure I fully trusted that progression, but once the muscle memory sort of kicked in, once you do it over and over again, it's amazing how things that seemed like big obstacles in the first couple days just become routine hiccups that you roll through. And it was amazing how quickly that happened.
And the last little bit I was just going to add is we have a wonderful school nurse at our public elementary school who has just also become involved in his care because she does some things for him during the school day. And she has reached out and connected with Boston as well, and found them to be a really helpful resource for her and for the other. There's a couple nurses in that office. And so it feels so good to know that when we can send him off to first grade, there's somebody who knows and is connected with Boston at school and knows the process as well and can help us as part of his support group.
Right. And it's true. I think one of the things that you mentioned is that, and we talked about this a little earlier, but it takes a village. And there are a lot of moving parts when you're dealing with a 6-year-old little boy who's going off to school and who still is living his best life and doing all the things, to make that process that much easier and to communicate. And as I've said, it's about phone calls, it's about conversations, it's about making sure that you were prepared. And one thing that stuck with me is that, all the education and the things that you got, whether you were inpatient, really paved the way for you. And I know that I am grateful because we have an incredible team that's able to do that and is to make sure that you're ready too. That's the other piece. It's, are you ready? We think you're ready.
Yeah, I mean, and I think we are like always here. No question is too small. Like you said, sometimes, did I really need to call in that moment? But we're really dedicated. Our team is dedicated to this patient population and to our families. And just to speak a little bit about the school piece, when kids go home, our team and especially Carol work really closely with our schools as much as we need to make sure that families feel good about sending their kiddos back to school, which is where they should be and want to be anyways. So Carol talks to many school nurses, especially at the beginning of the school year, but all year through. And we really welcome that. So we're glad that you're having that experience. I think, thank you so much, Calhoun family, for joining us to sort of share some of your experience. I really hope that people watching have gotten a good flavor to understand that our team is so much more than just the team you see in visits, that we're really here to sort of hug the family and the child through this really challenging diagnosis and time. And so that there's a lot of support all the way through, but especially during that really kind of daunting transition home. I think if we're able to, we'd like to open it up for some questions for the last couple of minutes. So let me just take a look and see. Okay, so I think the first question here, it says, what happens if there is an emergency when we are home and it's an off time or holiday? I think this is a really good question, especially we just had Thanksgiving and we're having some other holidays now coming up. So we are available pretty much 24/7. There is a lot of accessibility to our team. During the workday, we have dedicated nursing and nurse practitioner staff. And then after hours, we have availability through often through our paging system, but to have a physician speak with families similar to what the Calhouns expressed, that is pretty familiar with our patients, their diagnoses and their supplies, their pumps, their everything that they might be dealing with issues at home. So we really support our families in the off time as well. Let's see what the next question is. So the next question is about how do we connect? Is there a way for other families to connect? Which is another great question. We have a pretty big community of families in our program. We do have a Facebook group. It's called the Advanced Nutrition Support Group, I believe. I'll have the link added here in the chat, in the Q&A box. We'll put that in there. And then that's a great place for families to go to find each other. It's a group where our Boston families can meet each other. We also do have a family support group for caregivers for families through our program as well, which is a Zoom-based support group that allows our families to connect as well, which is a really great resource. Okay. Let me just see. If there are any other questions.
I have one question for the Calhouns.
Great.
If we could, what could we do better? Is there anything that you feel like, oh, I wish you would do this? I mean, are there any suggestions, or are there things that you would think we could improve upon, or?
That's a good. Katie, is anything?
I'm sorry, not a trick question either. I'm sorry.
No.
If you could control the pharmacies, that would be great.
Yeah, no, I would say, yeah.
Other than that, no,
Yeah.
I can't think of a single thing. I think there's times where we're frustrated, but it often has to do with the pharmacy end of things. And then they come through, and actually Boston has actually been really helpful and sometimes helping that work out better.
Right.
But yeah.
I will openly admit that I cried in the line or in the drive-through when the pharmacy told me the iron that they promised me on Friday. I was in the drive-through on Monday, and they said, it is not here and there is nothing I can do for you. And I didn't know how to respond in that moment. And so a magic wand that could fix that. Yeah, but we're tired. No, but at the same time, those phone calls, there's follow-up and things happen, and we figure it out and we troubleshoot, and
Yeah.
Right. And I think you raise a good point too. It's, as we talked about, it takes a village, but there are, and Elizabeth can attest to this, there are many phone calls that go on behind the scenes, like the Wizard of Oz, right? We are making the phone calls to those pharmacies and trying to wave those magic wands to get you what is needed. But yeah, it's a process. And especially in a time of a global pandemic, like to come home to that in a world that's just so very different, right? So I think it's a testament to you as parents and to your family. And I know I can speak for us when I say it's an honor to be able to partner with you to take care of your little boy.
Absolutely. And you guys did such an amazing job. We can see in the Q&A in the chat just how much support that our team is giving you guys too. So you guys, it's a partnership between our team and the families. And so working with you guys was really what made the experience really the positive one that it was. I think that is going to be it for this webinar. If anyone has any additional questions after viewing this video, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, and there will be contact information provided. We really appreciate everyone who attended, and we hope you have a great day.